On today's episode, I'm joined by Chuck Emerson, the CEO of Asian Box, one of my favorite local brands here in Northern California. Chuck has a really interesting story with years of experience helping brands like Mary Callender's, Life Kitchen scale, and took the helm of the CEO position of Asian Box around the time of the pandemic. It's a really inspiring story of how a leader comes in, helps take the reins, take a company through hard times, and is now preparing the brand for growth. So I hope you enjoy. Chuck, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
First, I got to say, I'm a big fan. I think we talked about this before. When I was studying up in the Bay Area, I used to eat your food all the time. And I remember actually getting catering a few times for a group that I was putting on at Stanford. So big fan of the concept. I think with thinking about some of the brands that I'm seeing today that are having a lot of success, a lot of them, I think personally, are having a focus on good food, healthy, gluten-free. And also there's this new age of Southeast Asian concepts that are popping up. So I really wanted to personally just understand your story and where Asian Box is going, because I'm sure it's going to expand across first California and maybe across the US. So would love to kind of dive into that. So without further ado, Chuck, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into this seat?
So yeah, my name's Chuck Imerson, Asian Box CEO. Yeah, I've been in the restaurant business since high school. I was a cook, worked my way, coming out of school, became a manager, spent a lot of time, 15 years at Marie Callender's, kind of worked my way up the ranks there. I left Marie Callender's, did a startup called Life Kitchen, Love Your Food Every Day, which was also a healthy food driven concept in Palo Alto, and then it expanded. And I've been with Asian Box since 2014. And worked my way from director of ops to CEO, took over in 2019, got to take over right before the pandemic. Lucky me.
We'll definitely talk about that.
Yeah. And, but it's been exciting, prior to working here, I wasn't into this kind of food. I hadn't been exposed to it really and fell in love with it. The founders were regulars at Life Kitchen. That's how I got to know them. And, the first Asian Box opened just a few months after the first Life Kitchen. So we were kind of connected there. And when it was time for me to move on from Life, I called the founder of Asian Box. He's like, come on over and you can start tomorrow.
That's amazing. What was Life Kitchen? Was it like a fast casual brand, or was it?
Yeah. The concept was a brainchild of Mike Roberts, who was COO and president of McDonald's, left McDonald's and wanted to do a healthy fast food. It ended up, I started a year before we opened helping develop the concept, and it kind of turned into a fast casual, which made more sense. So it was all, everything was under 1,000 calories, 800 milligrams of salt. So it still operates in Chicago, the franchise group in Chicago, but they just try to grow too fast all over the country at once, and just wasn't able to support it well. I left the company before they really started to leave California. But the Chicago franchisee, my understanding is they bought it and still operate them in Chicago.
It's always tough. Like when you have plans for growth, right? You oftentimes, depending on the types of capital you get or the types of partners you bring on, that growth trajectory might be a little bit too audacious. So I've talked to a lot of operators that are very meticulous about the franchisees they work with and the speed, the velocity of which they franchise and expand.
I was just going to say, that's so important to lay that foundation. Otherwise, you get over the skis, so to speak, and you can kind of lose control, or you're just not operating as efficiently as you can, or you're not doing a good service to the brand as far as food quality and service.
Right. Let's go back before we dive deeper into Asian Box. I want to learn more about your experience with Mary Callender's. What was your roles there? You said you worked up the ranks there. What did you learn? What were some of the positions you held? And how do you think that impacted the way that you run the operations now with Asian Box?
Yeah, I started as assistant manager back in, I guess, 1995, and aging myself a little bit here, but started as assistant manager. I grew up in San Diego, so I was there. And then a couple years into there, I became a GM pretty quick, within the year. Then I became new store operating supervisor. So I was up actually in Northern California in the Hayward area. We opened 3 in Oklahoma, Texas, did a few, Pacific Northwest. So I really got to travel. I got to see how to open restaurants properly. The beauty of Marie Callender's, at least back then, was a bakery with their pies they're famous for, the full service restaurant. A lot of them had bars. So you really got exposure to the full gamut of a restaurant, from the takeout business and the bakery. So it was a great experience. And I was a new store opening supervisor, then a director, then a senior director. I mean, when I left, I had 50 restaurants throughout 7 states that I was overseeing. So I really got a lot of exposure to the restaurant business, the ins and outs, how to grow. We had a big franchise side. I didn't oversee that directly, but I interacted with a lot of franchise groups because we shared marketing in 6 markets. And so it was a great experience as far as getting all that different exposure to the different pieces of the business. And, new store opening supervisor, I got to be involved in construction, real estate selection, all those sorts of things. So it really kind of prepared me for my next chapters.
I love that. I also do remember, I think Mary Callender's was the first or one of the first brands that went into CPG. And it did seem like it was quite successful, because I knew Mary Callender's from the pies that you would buy in the frozen section and all the other products that they had in retail locations. So do you think that were you around the time when they were starting to go into CPG? And what do you think of
The
brands that are finding different ways to interact with customers beyond just like their physical storefront?
When you say CPG, you mean the retail side?
Yeah, the retail side. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It actually, that was going when I started, that had already happened. It was a really smart move by Don Callender. I mean, he was gone by the time I got involved in the company, but he partnered with, ConAgra, had the licensing right to that. And they were a big player in that space. He made a great move there. And, I believe ConAgra owns the trademark today, but don't quote me on that. But that's my understanding is, that really became a big piece of the puzzle with them. And it's funny
Big
because,
piece of the pie.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Early on when they were first going to bring them to California, the frozen side, we were all nervous, but then we realized it's just a different customer. It didn't cannibalize the business. And you kind of learn that. Even fast forward to today, a lot of the third party customers aren't your in-store customers. And so it's okay to have kind of different deals and different focuses, because
Right.
there's just different kind of customers.
That's a very good point. I think that's a gold nugget there, right? I've often talked to operators. I think across the board, people are just so nervous and have a negative outlook on third-party deliveries. And one thing that I try to tell them is that cannibalization is bound to happen, but the types of people you're going to get on DoorDash are probably not going to come into the store, right? And same thing with catering as well. You get a completely different clientele.
Yeah, we've always had a philosophy that catering is going to drive box counts. And really, even a lot of times, especially being in Silicon Valley, I guess would probably be different than other parts of the country, is a lot of these companies have budgets to feed their employees. And they do it through the third party partners, whether it's in a catering format or individual box, DoorDash, but then they get exposure. And you hate to say it, but the budget for that employee who's using the company's money, they might
Absolutely.
little, they might do some add-ons that they might not normally do, but they get exposure
Absolutely.
to the product. And then when it's on their time, hopefully they're going to come in and seek you out. And we see that a lot in some of our stores, like Mountain View comes to mind, where we had a company across the street that would cater regularly. And then when we weren't catering, we'd see the customer, those employees in. And so it's a great way to drive your business as well.
Absolutely. I had a fat checkbook when I would order Asian box for catering. So I know exactly what you mean. How would you say the demographic or the way to do business in Silicon Valley in Northern California, how is that different than maybe other parts of the country that you used to operate in? Or at least different cities within the United States? Is it more competitive? Is there a different way that you have to reach customers? I'm sure operationally it's way more expensive. So you have to get a little bit creative.
Yeah,
What is the dynamic like there?
yeah, it's all proportional. Even when you talk about like franchising or growing outside of California, there's always that asterisk. I mean, real estate's going to be more expensive here, no question, where we operate in Northern California, and labor, but you also could charge more. So all of a sudden you decide, okay, well, we're going to move to, wherever, the Midwest somewhere, and you're going to pay less for real estate, less for labor, but you're also going to charge a little bit less. I
Absolutely.
think it becomes more favorable. I mean, the minimum wages, and not even the minimum wage in Northern California, the competitive wage. You know, everybody made a big deal about the $20 fast food thing, but the reality is a lot of our employees were at that already, you know, or
Yeah, you're paying around there before that
yeah, we
minimum
didn't
wage
lose
hike.
anybody. It's not like someone woke up and said, "Oh, I'm going to go work at McDonald's because they pay $20 an hour," when they're making 18 to 21 already, plus fast casuals, you know, have a tip element. So we didn't lose anybody to that, you know, and everybody's panic. I have a buddy who owns a franchise group of fast food, and he felt the pain for sure. You know, that was a
Absolutely.
big jump, and it's not like you can raise your prices to cover that all at once.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I went to school in Berkeley and I get a lot of flack for that because there was a massive research done that showed that the impact of, I think it was what, AB 2118? Don't quote me on the specific number, but there was a study that showed that it had zero effect on competition, had zero effect on margins of a business. But what you're telling me is that for a concept like yours, there wasn't much competitive pressure because you guys are providing already very good wages for your employees, plus also the environment and the work conditions and just the ambiance and the team dynamic in Asian Box is probably something that employees would gravitate towards rather than, you know, working in fast food. So it's a different type of employee
For sure.
profile.
We've been so lucky with the managers we have. I mean, through the pandemic, I always bring up is, you know, everybody stayed through. I mean, what I always share is our LA store, which the lease is now expired, but at the time we closed it for a year. It was downtown LA, you know, at the
Okay.
base
Very
office.
expensive.
Well, it was because of the pandemic. You know, the pandemic hit and nobody was going downtown. You know, everybody's work from home. So we literally closed it for a year, and every employee came back.
Wow.
The GM, he just went and got another job. And right when I called him and said, "Hey, we're going to reopen," he was, "Yeah, no problem. Let me know when." And we had a lot of loyalty with the management teams and the staff. And, you know, we juggled, we stayed open. We were fortunate, all except for that store. And we were already set up. We were doing a lot of takeout business. We have a big partnership with DoorDash. And our Palo Alto store was one of the first 10 stores on the DoorDash platform. I mean, I
That's
remember
pretty cool.
I was with Live Kitchen at the time, but I remember Tony, the founder of
Yeah, yeah. Tony
coming
Shu.
a couple buddies and going, "Hey, we're doing this. Well, it's not a delivery business; it's a technology business." And I signed up, and Asian Box signed up as well. And you know, it's so funny. You know, flash forward now, and you know, I just had lunch with the CEO of Oran's, and they had signed up too. You know, so we're all in
They
the
were the
top.
first one, I believe. They were
Yeah,
number one.
yeah, they have a great relationship with them. So, you know, you flash forward and now these stores, our Palo Alto stores, you know, has a great partnership with them. But
Good. Well,
yeah,
you're one of the few that have positive, you know, positive things to say. You were an early adopter. You know, you saw the potential in this technology, and at the time, even today, the team at DoorDash is fantastic. You know, they got really close to the operators and did something different. Because if you go back to when they started, these apps, these delivery apps, it was a very competitive market. Grubhub already had 60 or so percent of the market, but they came in and did something right.
yeah, and to your point, yeah, they've always been good at communication. They've been fair, and they've done a good job. You know, they've executed well, and then you know, at the end of the day, that's really important. And we've been very happy. We just went exclusive with them this year, so they're our only partner on the third party delivery service for
Very cool.
individual basis.
Very cool. Tony would be happy. Take me back to 2019, right? You took the helm as CEO, right? Where 2019 was a good year. And then all of a sudden, bam. At the time, I was actually running a catering business. So I went out
Wow.
of business. Take me back to 2019 and then through the pandemic. What was it like for you coming in as the new CEO? What did
Well,
you do to survive? And then how did Asian Box evolve through that period?
yeah, I mean, it was certainly, yeah, I can remember like talking to my wife, "Oh, this will be over in a couple weeks. This is not a big deal." When everything kind of hit in March, and you know, boy, I was wrong. But again, we were set up for the third party. So even though we took a hit, we had a few stores in Southern California that were struggling already. We ended up having to move away from those. So that was unfortunate. But in Northern California, we outside of, I think we had one store we closed for a couple of weeks. Everybody stayed open for the most part. Most of our landlords worked with us in some capacity. A couple didn't, but for the most part, they were all real good about it. And we had to reduce the amount of staff. I had to lay off some corporate people, but it was all about communication and working with them. And as soon as we could bring them back, we did. And I think it's no different what a lot of people experienced. I think we were fortunate that we had good, again, at the time, we had all the third parties, partnerships going, we're able to
You were prepared. You were prepared to adapt on the fly.
Better than most. I
Right.
know a lot of the full services had to pivot and figure out how to do takeout well, and even a lot of fast casuals that weren't all in, to your point earlier, that maybe were skeptical or nervous about paying the fees and this and that came with the third parties. But we really leaned into it. It really turbocharged that business. Obviously, a lot of people used it then. Went from 20% of our business to 80% of our business overnight. So we were able to build back, I think, faster than most. We didn't get back to 2019 for a while. We're starting to see those numbers now, or we did last year. So I think good communication with the teams, having good managers that have a sense of ownership, just being honest with the staff really helped us get through it. And like I said, when we had to make tough decisions, everybody understood why, and we helped the team get through it.
Got it. Yeah, that's very commendable. When we last talked, you said you guys were exploring other ways to get in front of customer. I know that you guys are in the Asian Museum, right? You guys have a storefront there.
Yep.
Where are you guys thinking of growth in the next 2 to 5 years? Where am I going to see Asian Box next?
Our investor group, we have a lot of small investors we have for many years, and we are going to do a fundraise to accelerate growth later this year. And so I'll be out, looking for people that want to invest in Asian Box. So if anybody's interested, feel free to reach out. But basically, right now, we opened an Asian Art Museum almost 2 years ago now, and that's been a great partnership. We're inside their lobby, but guests can come in even if they're not visiting the museum. We have a site at SFO Airport that we own and operate ourselves, but we also
have a
terminal? Terminal G, the International.
International, G. Okay.
And then we're opening in the San Jose airport later this year with SSP as a licensee, and they run a lot of different restaurants in airports. So that'll be our first partnership, and we're looking forward and excited about that. So hopefully that'll open at the end of the summer. They're about to start construction. And then we're looking at real estate in Northern California. Our immediate plans are to grow in Northern California for company stores. Okay. And then the plan is to later this year is franchise. We just got our FDD in place.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Our brand, easy to operate, high quality food, a unique offering with the Vietnamese style food is all going to be positives toward that growth.
I see. I'm actually very curious. What is that process like of getting your brand into, let's just say, like a museum or an airport? How is that different than opening up in the neighborhood?
It's interesting with the airports. They put out an
RFP.
RFP. You submit, and we submitted years ago prior to me joining the company, actually, and I joined the company pretty soon after they opened. And we missed out by half a point in the voting. They have a whole committee that votes on everything from food and decor and everything, and just didn't sit right with us. And actually, we had a contact with the airport at that point in time. So when the pandemic started, I just reached out to that contact and said, "Hey, you have anything open in the airport? We're looking to grow." And he's like, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do. We have someone who closed a Vietnamese restaurant. We want to reopen it. And they don't." And so we ended up buying the lease from them. And it's been interesting running it ourselves because of the union and everything else. But it's been
it's competitive.
Yeah, it's been successful. Obviously, airports have a built-in audience, so there's a lot of advantages. So we're excited. It's been a successful store for us overall. The museum, we kind of lucked into that. We got reached out to. We were looking for a new vendor there. We submitted with 5 other restaurants, and we won the bid. And I think they just saw what we do. They visited a couple of our local stores. It was just an obvious great fit. Asian Box.
Absolutely. That was an easy one.
Fantastic there. I mean, they've been great partners. It's very up and down based on what exhibits they have, what they have going on. They certainly have slower times, and it's only 5 days a week.
Interesting.
And limited hours. So,
even very non-conventional.
Yeah, even though it's a slower top line store, it's very efficient and it had a great year last year and it's starting off strong this year. And, we do a lot of, on the 2 days that the museum's closed, we just started opening for lunch and catering. And we just got a massive order tomorrow with DoorDash and for that store, which is normally closed on Tuesdays. So all
Awesome.
hands on deck tomorrow at the museum.
You can't, I mean, sometimes it's hard to evaluate the goodwill and the marketing that you get from being in these kind of non-traditional sites, right? I might travel. I was just in Atlanta for the first time and I tried Corritos and I've always wanted to try it, but because I was making this quick layover, I had the opportunity and I got exposed to the brand. Sorry, Corritos was in Cleveland. And you start to see the same thing with museums and other locations where you put yourself out there, you attract an audience that has never actually seen you before, and then you're with them in the back of their mind. And then when they see you again, they're like, "Oh, I remember, seeing this brand at the airport, at the museum." So I think it builds up a lot of brand loyalty. And while maybe the sales are not as consistent, it sounds like you're being very creative and in the fact that you are able to attract customers without them actually getting into the museum as well.
Yeah, and it's growing every year as the museum does different things to attract more customers and we do things. It's been a winning partnership, but you're absolutely right. Even the airport location as well, people years ago, there was a stigma of, oh, if it's gluten free, it must not taste good. And that's just really lack of education in what that means. And we're almost naturally gluten free when we
Right.
first opened, and we just had to go to a higher quality soy to be 100% gluten free. And then our chef Grace developed a gluten-free banh mi, gluten-free chocolate chip cookies. So she's brought a unique spin to deliver a high quality product that's gluten-free to people that are experiencing that. But yeah, no, for sure.
As you start to expand, what is the type of franchisee profile you're looking for?
We want good operators. The key to our success is first and foremost the food. We have great food quality, fresh, high quality, healthy. And so someone's got to be able to execute that. And then obviously service is, the close to, if you talk about like getting exposed to a brand in the airports or anywhere, the food is good. People are going to remember it. Um,
Excellent.
and even more so than service. I mean, service is a close to, of course, but the food quality is number one, service number two. And anybody we partner with, whether it's a well-established franchise group that's looking to expand their portfolio to bring in a unique brand, or a lifetime GM who wants to own their own business, we're going to be open to anybody who feels a good operator or partnered with a good operator that's going to take care of the brand. And so we'll be open to the right person.
Good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Everyone listening, reach out to Chuck. Chuck, last question for you before we wrap up. I always try to ask my guests, who do they look up to in this industry? Maybe it's a mentor or an up and coming executive. Who do you see has a really interesting story or good playbook that you've followed and taken after, or at least respect?
I think over the years, I've been lucky to work directly with people. A couple of them aren't in the business anymore that kind of like, I think about my mentor at Marie Callender's, Robin Henley. She's in the real estate business now. But I mean, what she taught me, I could never repay her for that. And Mike Roberts at Life Kitchen. I mean, what a great person. A smart human. And, in the industry, there's the Danny Myers of the world. You just look at how meticulous, how they went about their business, and you just think about that. So it's kind of been a lot of different people have impacted me or given me different tidbits to work with.
Amazing. Chuck, thank you so much for joining the show. I am very excited for Asian Box growth and expansion, and I hope to see it all over Northern California and then back in Southern California and across. We need to bring, good Vietnamese food across the U.S. There's a huge market there. So I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Take
All
care.
right.